Hi guys, welcome back to Copyright Law in Kenya Part 4. In this video, our focus will be on the types of rights that different copyright owners have. Remember in the previous video I emphasized the distinction between an author and an owner. So you need to understand that first before you appreciate the meaning of economic and moral rights. These are the types of rights we have as far as copyrights are concerned. And when you check Section 32 of the Copyright Act of Kenya, as in consideration of moral rights, these rights will forever remain with the author of a copyright, even if economic rights have been transferred. So what I'm trying to mean here is that if you come up with a piece of art and you are working under contract of employment or work was commissioned to you, then in that case, the economic rights will be transferred to the owner of the copyright, meaning the person paying for that piece of work, while you as the author, you will forever have a moral right to that piece of work. So basically that is what Section 32 of the Copyright Act of Kenya talks about. Remember the examples of copyright, we talked about them in video 1, and we talked about artistic work, we talked about music, audio visuals, sound recording. So you can refer back to video 1 to understand what does a copyright mean. Now moving ahead, remember that again you can come up with a piece of work as a group of people. In this case you are a group of authors, and so you will forever have a moral right to that piece of work. The other thing you need to appreciate is that moral rights do not expire and they cannot be transmitted. What I mean here is that today if you drew a piece of art for someone, you will forever have a moral right to that piece of work, even though you don't have an economic right. Even though you've transferred the economic rights to the person paying you for that piece of work, it will never change that you are the person who drew that painting, you are the person who came up with that artistic impression. That can never change. That's why Section 32 emphasizes that moral rights do not expire and they cannot be transmitted. And so, with that in mind, I also remember that as an author, you have a right against mutilation, and when you check actually Section 32 of the Copyright Act of Kenya, it provides that no one has a right to destroy your work. So if you come up with a painting, no one has a right to come and destroy that painting because you have a right against mutilation. The next thing is that you can be able to claim authorship at any point in time, meaning that if you came up with a piece of work, if it was again a photograph, it was a painting, whatever sort of art you come up with, you will forever have a right to claim for authorship of that work. That will never change, even though you've transferred economic rights to someone else. But also you need to note that attribution is a moral right, but it does not get authors out of copyright infringement, meaning that work can be attributed to you, but again you can't go ahead to infringe it because you've transferred ownership. Ownership does not belong to you as an author if you're working under contract of employment, meaning that you can also go ahead and infringe someone's copyright. Remember, when you did the work, you transferred ownership to someone else, and so the fact that this work has been attributed to you, it does not get you out of a copyright infringement action. Now, just to take you back where we started in video 3 on copyright law in Kenya, remember we talked about a photographer who does work for himself, and in that case is both the author and the owner. And we also talked about a situation where someone can be employed, meaning that they're simply the authors and not the owner of a copyright to that piece of work. So consider watching video 3 so that you understand where we came from, and this slide is just an emphasis on the distinction between an author and an owner. And we've established that as an author, you always have a moral right to that piece of work, even if you've transferred the economic right to someone else. And so in that regard, I want us to also appreciate an analysis that you can perform when there is a copyright infringement. As a student of copyright law in Kenya, you need to understand how does a court look at a copyright infringement case, or how can you analyze a situation that involves copyright infringement. Number one, for you to analyze a situation of copyright infringement, in the first place, a copyright needs to exist. Again, this takes you back to video 1, meaning that the first thing is to establish that we have a copyright, and this is the first way of establishing that you have copyright. The next thing you need to ask yourself, who is the author of this piece of work? This again takes us back to Section 2 of the Copyright Act of Kenya, and remember that the author is the person who comes up with that piece of work. And as far as this video is concerned, and from the previous discussions we've had, the author does not sue for copyright infringement. And so this takes us to the next question, which is to ask yourself, who is the owner? Now, the owner is a person who does the suing as far as copyright infringement is concerned. And again, this takes you to Section 31 of the Copyright Act of Kenya. Now, having known the owner, the next thing you need to ask yourself, was there an infringement? And according to Section 35 of the Copyright Act of Kenya, now, the owner of a copyright has the authority now to institute a copyright infringement and seek for redress. So just to recap where we started, number one, you establish that there is a copyright existing. Then you'll ask yourself, who is the author? Then you ask yourself, who is the owner? The owner does the suing according to Section 35 of the Copyright Act of Kenya. The next question you need to ask yourself, the next thing actually you need to determine is which rights have been infringed. Remember, in the first video we talked about the rights of a copyright owner, and as a copyright owner you have a right to distribute your own work, you have a right to adaptation of your own work, and you have a right to reproduction of your own work. These words were defined in video 1, and we said that as far as adaptation is concerned, if you have written a book and someone is now acting a movie out of that book, they need your authority before they act a movie out of the book. So that's what we would call adaptation. So in this case, you determine which rights have been infringed. Is the right of distribution? Has the right of distribution been infringed? Is it a right of adaptation or a right of reproduction? Having established which right has been infringed, the next question you need to ask yourself, was there access to the original? Remember, in video 2 we said that you could have sent your music video to someone else through an email, and a few months later they come up with the same exact music video. Another example here would be that by comparing two pieces of work, you can see that there's a substantial similarity, that for sure this person could have had access to the original for them to have such kind of work. Now, with that in mind, the next point of analysis is for you to compare the two pieces of work side by side by looking at the differences and similarities between these two pieces of work. Now, in this case, courts normally perform an objective test by comparing the similarities and differences, then they come to a conclusion. So this same analysis can be used as you approach a fact-based question on copyright law in Kenya. And so, with the objective analysis test being done, meaning that you look at these two works closely, look at the similarities, the differences, compare them, then come to a conclusion. Now, if there is just, of course, one similarity between the two pieces of work and the differences are much more than the similarities, then the answer would be that there was no copyright infringement. But in a case where we have maybe close to 70 similarities and one difference, then in that case you can see a substantial similarity between the two pieces of work. Remember, this is subject to evidence, this is subject to the pieces of work that are being compared, and then the court will come to a conclusion. So it's the same analysis that you can show as you approach an exam question. In the next video, we are going to focus on defenses for copyright infringement. So remember to subscribe so that you receive notifications when I upload the next video. We shall also review the case of Matthew Falk versus Beyonce, so that you know the flow of thoughts and how the court ended up concluding that case. Remember to subscribe. Thank you.